Good morning. I'm Jim Wilkins, in case you don't know, and I've been asked just to speak to you for a few minutes, and I thought I'd like to do this informally as if we were having a cup of coffee together. I have my coffee mug here, which is, according to regulations, masked, and I would just like to mention 4 things that seem important to me, having taught in this hybrid model. I know hybrid model, there's not an official name for it, but simply a class in which you invite two different audiences, an audience by Zoom and an audience in person in the classroom with you. And here are the 4 things that I noticed. I'll give them to you first and then I'll go back and just make a comment on each one. The first is inclusion. The second is pre-course housekeeping. I like to call it nuts and bolts. The third one is assessment, and the fourth is collaborative work, because those are 4 things that I'm sure a lot of people have questions about, which I did and still do somewhat. The first is inclusion. I think one of the most important things about having a Zoom audience and having an in-person audience is that each audience feels included in the interaction, the complete interaction. I guess one would think that it's making the Zoom people feel as if they're part of the class, that would be the main focus, or perhaps the most difficult thing to do, but that's not always the case. Sometimes you pay so much attention to the Zoom people to make sure that you can hear them, and also to be sure that you're paying attention to them, and you end up paying them more attention than you do actually the people in the class, eye contact in the class. So it's really kind of a transformed method that teachers used to have to learn, and that is not favoring one side of the room or the other. And in this case, it's not favoring one audience over the other, and that's something that I think you really have to pay attention to. Ideally, and I'm not sure what all the setups on all our rooms are going to be, but it's ideal, I think, to have the Zoom screen toward the back of the class. And the reason is that you want the Zoom audience to see students in the classroom. I think that's a very important thing, is that they're able to see that live audience in the classroom to make this more of a seamless experience for everyone. The second thing are pre-housekeeping. I call them pre-course housekeeping matters, but in all of my syllabus, I give this separate sheet of paper called nuts and bolts, in which I discuss the very practical things of the class. I don't put them in my syllabus necessarily, but things that I expect from students and things that they can expect from me. I did notice in teaching during session 2 this summer that sound issues are a huge thing. I found myself kind of ad nauseum asking students to repeat, students on Zoom, in the Zoom participant group, to repeat themselves, because depending on the equipment that they have, if they move just slightly while they're saying something, the sound will cut, and so you're getting sentence fragments. And so that can be a difficult thing, and those are things that you should test with the Zoom students in your first day of class, second day of class, whenever you want to do that. But I think that's an important issue, are sound issues. And you also want to be sure that the Zoom students can hear students in the classroom. I was fortunate enough to have a mic set up in the middle of the table. We were in a large conference room, and they were able to regulate the sound, and sound was not an issue coming from students in the classroom, but it often was coming from students at Zoom. I also ask that all students unmute and video. They have to show themselves on video. They have to show themselves, and they have to unmute to be considered present in the class session itself. Because I like to ask questions, I like to throw questions out to people, and if they have to take time to unmute themselves, or they start speaking and they don't realize they're still muted, it just takes up a lot of time. I want everyone unmuted, and so they need to be in a place, this would be your housekeeping item, they want to be in a place where they're not likely to be interrupted by barking dogs and smaller siblings running and playing games, that kind of thing. But also, they have to be videoed. You have to be able to see them. I know I heard from a professor that students are getting very clever about this, changing their name to, for example, connecting to audio. They can change their name on the screen, and so you think they're connecting to audio, and they'll be with you here in just a minute, when actually they're there. If they say, well, I'm having a bad hair day and I want to be on video, throw a hat on or get up early enough to comb your hair And that actually was the biggest excuse for not showing video. So I thought it was kind of interesting and perhaps a little time worn. The third thing is assessment. I know people have asked this question too, is how do you assess when you have two disparate audiences like this? You have an in-class audience, which can do things on paper, and then you have your distance audience, which is likely going to do things from Moodle, pull up documents from Moodle. After reflecting on what happened during this short session 2 during the month of June, I think I've decided to make my in-class students also dependent on pulling up documents from Moodle. Everybody's going to have to pull up the documents from Moodle. I'm going to try to go paperless as much as possible. What I was doing is having my Zoom students pull up the documents off of Moodle, and I was giving a paper copy to my students who are with me in the classroom. However, I think I'm going to unify that process and make everyone do the same thing with handouts and other documents, of course, which can be projected on your Zoom screen as well, but things that they may want to keep with them and have to look at later and study later. So I did use Moodle quite a bit for that reason and plan to keep doing that, but probably unifying the process and making everyone pull up their documents from Moodle so that I don't have to make photocopies at 6:30 in the morning. Now, of course, these are things that you're going to do for a regular class. I mean, teaching with Zoom people in the classroom is not that different from teaching a regular class. Just the things I've mentioned, perhaps doing the sound checks, making sure screens are unmuted, that type of thing is very different. But this is something we're all used to, so it's just kind of combining these two and making them work together. And as I understand it, some classes will have no Zoom students in them at all. You'll have some classes that everybody will be there. So this is in case you do have a class where you have to have the two separate audiences. The last thing is collaborative work. How do you get students to work collaboratively, especially if you try to have active learning in the classroom where students work in small groups, they collaborate on assignments and projects. One possible solution to that is have everyone in the room sign on to Zoom. At a time when you're getting ready to do a collaborative activity. Have everyone sign on to Zoom and then include them in the breakout rooms. Invite them into the breakout rooms with the people on Zoom. Or if you wish, you can have people in the classroom do collaborative exercise and only do breakout rooms with the people on Zoom, which means they are always working together, and especially in a small situation, that gets a little tedious, where they're always working with the same voice, the same person, the same brain, and that's something I think you try to vary as you do different collaborative work. Another possibility is FaceTime. Students love FaceTime. They can go into a different room, they can go outside for a few minutes, sit and FaceTime each other to keep distancing a priority in the classroom. Twitter, you can set up a private Twitter room where students can Twitter among just the people in the class. That can be kind of a fun activity as well. But I think these 4 points actually boil down to trying to find balance in the classroom between the distance and the in-class people. And I find this era, kind of I guess we're still mid-COVID actually, I was going to say post-COVID, but we're still in the COVID era, as a very creative time. I think it's kind of like after the invention of the internet, all the inventive ways people decided to use it and make use of it, and all the different social media that developed as a result of all of it. And it's kind of interesting for us as teachers, I think, at a university like this to invent ways that we can make this work. And I know I'm working with a bunch of colleagues that will do just that. It's been great talking to you today. Have a great day.